Because I find it interesting, today I'm going to show you a brief demonstration of how the general combat systems work in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, the 2nd edition. As I mentioned in a previous video, I like bloody, deadly, gritty combat systems. And I think Warhammer handles it in a very interesting way, and hopefully you'll be able to see some of the results of how it works. And so in this example scenario, we're going to use our resident dwarf troll slayer, Orzad, and facing off against an orc warrior. For the purposes of this video, let's assume that they're engaged in close melee combat, and we'll just do a couple of simple exchanges. Warhammer 2nd Edition is primarily a percentile-based game system, so most of your characters' attributes and skills are all going to be rated through a percent score, and then you have to roll equal to or less than that percent number when you're trying to achieve success with an action. In a simple exchange, when you're making an attack, you're using one of your characteristics, which is called weapon skill, and so you have to roll equal to or less than your weapon skill on an attack to succeed. Now, characters do have a variety of different combat maneuvers that they can perform, like the equivalent of all-out attacks and defensive stances, charge attacks, and this sort of thing that you might be used to from other role-playing games. But again, for simplicity's sake, let's just take a simple attack example and not bother with fiddling with the various modifiers for these different types of maneuvers. Let's say that Orzad has his 2 hand axes drawn and he's ready to bear down upon the orc. The orc is carrying a choppa, which is orc blade, plus he's got a shield to help protect him. So when Orzad makes his attack, he has to test his weapon skill, so he'll roll percentile dice. Now what I like to do to speed combat along in Warhammer is, because all damage is based on another d10 plus the weapon rating of whatever weapon you're attacking with. So I like to roll the weapon damage die at the same time that I test the skill, so that you get all the dice rolling out of the way at the same time. Now, Orzad's weapon skill is a 46, which means he has to roll 46 or less in order to successfully strike a blow against the orc. So we roll our dice, and here we see that Orzad rolled a 29 on his weapon skill attack. So that's less than his 46 characteristic rating, which means that no other complications withstanding, his blow will successfully land on the orc. Now, because the orc is carrying a shield, he has the opportunity to do what's called parry the attack. Parrying is also a weapon skill test. Because he's carrying a shield, which is a defensive weapon, he actually just takes a minus 10% penalty to his weapon skill trait in order to attempt to parry Orzad's blow. The orc's weapon skill rating is only a 35, so with minus 10%, he only has a 25% chance to succeed. So we roll, and we see that the orc rolled a 90, which means that he did not succeed at parrying the attack. The orc's defense failed, so Orzad's attack of 29 succeeds. There's an optional hit location system in Warhammer 2nd Edition. Now, it is optional, you're not required to use it, but I highly suggest that you do, just because it adds so much more to the combat. You don't need to make any additional rolls or anything like that if you're using the hit location system. All you simply have to do is invert the digits of your attack roll. So if Orzad rolled a 29 to hit, then that means his hit location is going to be determined as if he had rolled a 92. And there are 6 hit locations in Warhammer 2nd. The head, left arm, right arm, body, left leg, and right leg. And we see that a roll of 92 means that the blow landed on his target's left leg. Now, this little area is talking about your armor points. If you use the hit location system, then you will have different values of armor based upon where you are hit. So in Orzad's example, he's wearing simply a leather jerkin. That's the only thing that he's got armor-wise. So he has 1 point of armor protecting his body, but he is not armored anywhere else. Now, the orc is wearing armor, but unfortunately the armor he's wearing doesn't cover the legs. So Orzad taking advantage of this, strikes a blow to the orc's left leg, which is unprotected. Weapon damage, again, is based off of the roll of a d10 plus the damage value of the weapon that's being used. Now, in this case of Orzad's hand axes, they're a hand weapon that does damage equivalent to Orzad's strength bonus. And because Orzad's strength bonus is a 3, that means that I take the 10 that I rolled on this die and I add 3 to it, so that the damage is 13. Now, in most other, on a roll of 1 through 9, that would be it. That would be all the damage calculating that you would need to do, and then you would apply that damage and subtract any armor and toughness that is protecting them, and that determines the total amount of wound points that are dealt to a target, and I'll get back to wound points in a moment. But there's something that makes combat even more unpredictable and dangerous in Warhammer 2nd Edition, and that's called Ulrich's Fury. Whenever you roll a 10 on the damage die, you have unleashed Ulrich's Fury, and you have the potential to do even more damage than that. So in that instance, you would pick up your percentile dice again, and you would check to see if you rolled equal to or less than his weapon skill, whatever the value of the skill was that you made for the initial attack. So again, Orzad's weapon skill is 46, so I would test to see if I unleash Ulrich's Fury, and I rolled a 26, which means I do. So that means I get to pick up this die and roll it again and add the result to the damage that was dealt. So here we can see I rolled a 10 plus 2 for 12, plus 3 from the weapon damage of Orzad's axe. So that's 15 wound points of damage. Now, characters in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, for humanoid characters of medium size, generally are going to have between 10 to 14, maybe 15 wound points. Advanced characters might acquire a few more wound points beyond that, 16 or 17 wound points perhaps, but they're never going to go very far beyond those limits. In this particular instance, this orc has 12 wound points. So Orzad's dealt 15 wounds of damage to him. Well, if he was being hit in an armored location, he would get to subtract any armor points that he has protecting him. Unfortunately, he has no leg armor, so he gets no armor benefit, but every character does get to use their toughness bonus. For the orc example, his toughness is 4. So he can subtract 4 from the damage, and then that is the result. The result is how many wound points have been dealt. So 15 minus 4 is 11, which means that Orzad dealt 11 wound points of damage to the orc. Now, wound points by themselves pretty much act like hit points in Dungeons & Dragons and most other games, in that losing them doesn't mean anything intrinsically, though it is implied that wound points are actual physical damage that is inflicted upon the character in the form of kind of minor cuts, lacerations, scrapes, bruises, and that sort of thing. So in other words, it was a significant blow. I mean, it was 11 wound points. It leaves the orc with only 1 wound point remaining, which means that he probably gashed the orc across his left leg pretty savagely, but he hasn't amputated the leg. He hasn't caused any kind of real serious long-term damage in a general sense. So he left him with a pretty big laceration, probably a huge gash that's dripping greenish orc blood. But the orc is still capable of fighting back if he decides to do so. So the orc is going to counterattack, and again, he'll have to test his weapon skill, which is a 35, to see if he can make a blow land against his dwarf foe. So we roll here, and we see that the poor orc got a 47. Now, he did roll a 10, but unfortunately, if his blow doesn't land in the first place, he can't possibly inflict any damage. Now, player characters have a resource that will allow them to occasionally make re-roll failed skills and that sort of thing, but the poor orc NPC, he doesn't have the benefit of anything like that. So he failed to roll less than his 35 weapon skill, and so therefore his blow misses, and there's really not much that he can do about it, and he should probably consider running away now. Now, if he had made an all-out attack, which in this example he may have decided to do so, He could gain a plus 10 or a plus 20% bonus. I believe it's a plus 20% bonus if he makes an all-out attack, but that means that he would be permitted, parries or dodges on his round. But let's assume that he did. Let's say that he decided before he rolled his dice to make an all-out attack, gaining a plus 20% to his weapon skill, turning his weapon skill into a 55. In that case, he would have succeeded in hitting Orzad, which would, in the same turn, prompt Orzad to make any defense that he wishes to make. Let's go with that example just as another example of determining hits, locations, and damage here. And we can tell his hit location would be a 74 instead of a 47. And a 74 hit location is actually a blow to the body. Now, thankfully, Orzad is wearing his leather jerkin, so he gets a minor amount of armored protection to his torso. But the orc rolled a 10, so there's the potential to unleash Ulrich's fury against him. Orzad does actually have the dodge blow skill, so he's going to attempt to dodge the orc's choppa blow, and he has a 26% chance to do so. So he has a 26% chance. He rolled a 38, which means that Orzad is not able to dodge the attack. The orc does strength bonus plus 1. The orc's strength bonus is a 3, plus 1 is 4, plus 10 is 14. Now he tests his weapon skill to see if he unleashes Ulrich's fury. Now remember, because he made an all-out attack, his weapon skill for this attack was 55. So he has to roll a 55 or less. And he rolls an ought 1. So he does unleash Ulrich's fury. He picks up his die and he rolls it again. And he gets a 5. So 10 plus 5 is 15, plus 4 is 19 wound points of damage. Now Orzad only has 13 wound points. No, but he was struck in the body, so he has 1 point of armor from his leather jerkin, and his toughness bonus is a 4, giving him a total of 5 points of protection against these 19 points of damage. Now, 19 minus 5 is 14. Well, Orzad had only 13 wound points, which means that the 13 of that damage would carry him to 0 wound points, and he still has 1 point of damage left over beyond that. There are no negative wound points in Warhammer Fantasy. Any time that you would take damage beyond 0 wounds, that would carry you below 0 wounds, you have taken a critical hit instead, and you have to make a roll on a critical hit table. You need to know the number of points below 0 the attack would drop you. So in this case, the orc has reduced Orzad to 0 and has dealt 1 additional point on top of that. So that means the critical value of this attack is only a 1. So the attacker would roll his percentile dice to against the critical hit table to determine the effect based on the location. Critical hits are sensitive to location, so you have different critical hits for the head, the body, the arms, and the legs. So we roll here, and we roll a 12. Orzad is knocked to the ground and badly winded. All of his tests and attacks suffer a minus 30% penalty for 1 round, and he must use the stand action to regain his feet. So the blow was so savage that it actually knocked Orzad over. And so he took, a good chop to the body, probably gashed through his armor, knocking Orzad down, blood gushing, and but he is not out of the fight. He is badly wounded and takes a penalty for a round and needs to stand again. But otherwise, he's still conscious and he's able to continue acting in whatever fashion that he decides to do so. Now, let's say on his turn he will spend a half action to stand himself back up. He's not going to flee. He's a troll slayer. He wants to just bring his opponent down, and he's only left with 1 lingering wound point, so any blow that he can deliver to his opponents probably stands a good chance of laying him low. So Orzad is going to make a simple attack again against his target. In fact, he'll make an all-out attack because he just wants to kill this guy. He's not worried about dodging and parrying and everything. So that'll add again like a plus 20% bonus to his weapon skill of 46, making it a 66. So we'll roll that, and we see it's a good thing that he did, because he rolled a 53. So that means because he was reckless, he lands his blow, and the hit location will be a 35. Now, unfortunately, he rolled a poor mere little 1 on his damage die, so he's probably not going to inflict a lot of damage, but then again, he doesn't really need to inflict that much. Now, a hit location of 35 actually hits his target in the right arm. Now, the orc has 1 point of armor on his right arm, and has a toughness of 4, so he has basically a damage soak of 5. Orzad's weapons deal his strength bonus of 3 plus the damage of 4, and because the target's armored, that means the blow actually glances off the armor and does not penetrate, does not inflict any wound points of damage. The orc can retaliate and see if he can finish off the injured dwarf, which he will do. Again with a full attack. Oh geez. And I've been getting really, really lucky. I'll never see this kind of luck in an actual game. But making a full attack of 55, he barely succeeds with a 52, with a hit location of 25, which is to the right arm again. So the orc will potentially strike a blow to Orzad's right arm, which is unarmored. We'll test his weapon skill to see if he can actually unleash Ulrich's Fury. So he needed a 55, remember. So, he does not, unfortunately. He rolled a 66. So that means the damage is still 10, but he just doesn't get to roll the effect again. Not that he really needs to. Now, the Choppa has been somewhat blunted by landing the first good blow, so it now only deals strength bonus damage. So it only deals plus 3 onto the 10, so only 13 wound points of damage. Orzad's already at 0 wound points. Now remember, there are no negative wounds. That means that the new damage that's coming at him this round will just be calculated as if counting down from 0. We'll pick up our percentile dice. We rolled a 54 on the critical table. It says, killed in whatever spectacular and gore-drenched fashion the player or GM can decide to describe. And so the orc brings his Choppa down upon poor Orzad, who, reeling and winded and disoriented from the initial savage attack that he took, has basically his right arm lopped off at the shoulder, spewing blood, and poor Orzad topples over, a big bloody mess. Now, admittedly, I got incredibly lucky on my damage dice, but there is a 10% chance when you're inflicting damage with an attack for Ulrich's Fury to be triggered, but that is an example combat scenario that unfortunately didn't go very well for our poor dwarf PC, but that's the way it is in Warhammer sometimes. Now, before people get too up in arms about this, oh my goodness, my PC could die in the second round of combat, there is something built into the game that kind of helps to alleviate this potential problem. Now again, player characters get a resource called Fortune Points, which allows them to reroll skill checks, and they can do a few additional things with it, such as taking additional actions on their turn. But more importantly, in scenarios like this, there is something called Fate Points. And Fate Points basically get your character out of situations exactly just like this. So if you're faced with a dire circumstance, your character can burn one of their very limited number of fate points, and they can basically avert that fate. So yes, there are ways for your character to escape these sorts of nasty fates, specifically built into the game, recognizing that it is a very lethal game.